Have you ever wondered what someone might be willing to do? Not out of hatred, but out of fear of losing control. It wasn't the kind of evening where you expect betrayal. The lights of Monte Carlo glittered across the bay, the room filled with applause, designer suits, and polished smiles. It was the eve of the Champions League final, arguably the most prestigious night in European football, and I was being honored, not for goals scored or trophies lifted, but for something else. Something more polarizing. They called me the conscience of the game. A former La Liga star turned advocate, a man who spoke too loudly about corruption, who dared to name names, who launched an academy for underprivileged kids and upset the wrong kind of powerful people in the process. I thought I knew how backlash worked, through tabloids, social media, contracts quietly withdrawn. But that night, at an exclusive gala hosted by elite sponsors, I learned something else. That the greatest threats don't always come from enemies. Sometimes they come from across the dinner table. She approached with a wine glass and a smile that had rehearsed warmth for years. "A special toast," she said, her tone honeyed, "for my favorite son-in-law." The way she said it was always performative, each syllable coated in sweetness just sharp enough to sting. I thanked her. I smiled. And when she turned to greet another guest, I quietly swapped the glass into the hand of the man beside me, her husband. The same man who had once told me that footballers shouldn't marry into legacy families. 45 minutes later, he was pale, shaking and vomiting violently in a gilded restroom stall. The party continued as if nothing had happened. She claimed it must have been bad shellfish, but when our eyes met across the ballroom, something passed between us, something silent but unmistakable. She knew. I knew. And I didn't say a word. What followed was a story of subtle warfare, of truth buried under privilege, and of one man's quiet retaliation, not to destroy a family but to protect one. If you've ever been caught between love and loyalty, truth and appearances, or if you've ever sensed that someone was trying to erase you politely from your own life, then stay with me. Because what happened next wasn't a scandal in the tabloids, it was deeper than that. It was the slow unraveling of a family's illusion of control, and it began with a single poisoned toast. And before we dive in, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone pretended to support you, only to sabotage you in silence? Like this video if it resonates, and subscribe for more true stories where justice doesn't come with shouting, but with strategy. Now, let me tell you what really happened that night. They never said it outright, not in the beginning. There were no dramatic declarations or slammed doors, just glances that lingered too long, compliments laced with judgment, and silences that spoke volumes. From the first time I met Camila's parents, I knew I was not what they'd imagined for their daughter. Her father, Eduardo Salvatierra, wasn't just any man. He was once a powerful figure in Spanish football management, a behind-the-scenes architect of careers, club deals, and legacy, a man who measured worth in pedigree and political influence. Her mother, Veronica, was the kind of woman who curated every element of her family's public image like a press release. Polished, smiling, impeccable. Camilla was their crown jewel, educated at Oxford, fluent in 3 languages, heir to a charitable foundation that had its own PR team. And then there was me, Lucas Moreno, born in Seville, raised by a single mother, professional footballer since 16, a national star by 23, retired by 30 after a spinal injury that almost paralyzed me for life. I had no lineage, no old money, no last name that opened the right doors at the right clubs, but I had built my name with talent, grit, and a sense of justice that many mistook for stubbornness. Camilla saw all of that. We met at a charity event in Barcelona, ironically one organized by her family's foundation. She had an intelligence that was quiet but piercing, and a kindness that didn't flinch in uncomfortable places. We connected before I even knew who her parents were, and once I found out, I tried not to care. At first, Eduardo played the disapproving diplomat. "So you're still involved in football? In what capacity exactly?" he asked at our second meeting, sipping a brandy, pretending the question was polite curiosity. Veronica took a different route. Smiles, faux warmth, and a relentless need to diminish me with praise. You must be so proud of all you've achieved, considering your background. I tried. God, I tried. I brought them into my world, invited them to my coaching clinics, sent them press clippings about the anti-corruption work I was doing in youth leagues. I thought if they saw the values Camilla saw in me, they'd understand. But nothing I did was ever quite right. Eduardo believed football should stay within the family of influence, not be reformed by it. Veronica, well, she believed that any man not under her control was a liability. Camila knew her parents had high standards. What she didn't know, what I didn't tell her, was how often those standards became weapons. The small digs, the moments I was cut out of family photos, the whispered comments about temporary passions and stable futures. Eduardo once handed me a brochure for a finance certification program as a friendly suggestion after I'd launched my 4th youth academy. Veronica gifted me a pair of cufflinks with the crest of a rival club, one that had blocked a corruption report I filed years ago. I told myself it would pass. That their resistance came from tradition, not malice. That if I kept showing up with good faith, I'd earn theirs. I was wrong. Behind the smiles was something else entirely. A fear not just of who I was, but of what I represented. To them, I wasn't just the outsider. I was the disruption. I challenged their values without meaning to. I loved Camilla without needing their approval. And worst of all, I had a voice. A loud one. One that others listened to. And for people like Eduardo and Veronica, silence wasn't just preferred. It was control. The week before that gala dinner in Monte Carlo, I had published a scathing editorial about corruption in European club politics. The article gained traction. It named names. Some of those names were Eduardo's close associates. That same week, I was scheduled to speak at a youth football summit, and Veronica had canceled a PR engagement to attend. Camilla said her mother just wanted to support me. I believed otherwise. The truth was they had stopped seeing me as a threat to their daughter's future and started seeing me as a threat to their legacy. But I still didn't see it coming. Not until that night. Not until that glass of wine. Not until I realized that some wars aren't declared with swords or lawsuits, but with smiles and sedatives, served at the perfect moment, dressed as affection. After that gala, the signs became harder to ignore. They'd always been there, quiet, calculated, but now they felt deliberate, as if Eduardo and Veronica had stopped pretending entirely. The poison in the glass wasn't just a moment of madness. It was the culmination of a campaign that had been unfolding in whispers, glances, and gestures for years. It started with Veronica's charm, the kind that always came with a cost. She had a way of making everything she offered sound generous, even when it was manipulative. "Lucas, I've scheduled a stylist to help you prepare for your BBC interview next week," she said once, unprompted. "They'll help you look a bit more refined." The word hung in the air like perfume. Expensive, artificial, condescending. I declined, of course, with a smile. But from that moment on, I noticed the subtle shifts. Rumors started leaking to the press. An article surfaced in a minor tabloid suggesting I was facing financial troubles with my foundation. A baseless claim, but timed perfectly a week before I was due to speak at a UEFA youth development panel. My team traced the source back to an anonymous email that had used a domain registered to a firm Veronica had worked with on several reputation management campaigns. Then came the coincidences. A potential sponsor dropped out of my youth program after hearing concerns from someone close to the foundation's board. A television interview I had scheduled about post-retirement life was suddenly canceled. No explanation, just gone. Even Camila's demeanor changed subtly. She began asking questions that didn't sound like hers. Why not focus more on stability now? Maybe take fewer risks? I knew where it was coming from. Eduardo had always pushed for me to take a back office, role in sports, something safe, apolitical, and most importantly under their influence. He even offered to pull some strings to get me a position as a brand ambassador for a multinational sports company. It came with a lucrative salary and zero impact. "You've done your part for the sport," he told me. "Now it's time to think of the future." I declined. Again. And each time I did, the air around their family seemed to grow colder. What hurt the most wasn't the sabotage itself. I had faced worse on the field. It was how skillfully they manipulated Camilla's perception of me. Slowly, subtly, they began to frame me as the unstable one. Veronica would voice her concerns delicately, always behind closed doors. "I just worry about how much pressure he puts on himself," she told Camilla. "All these confrontations, they're not healthy for a man thinking about starting a family." Eduardo took the direct route. He suggested Camilla and I see a counselor, not for her, of course, but for me. "It might help him get clarity," he said, "especially after the injury and all the changes in his career." He made it sound noble. Camilla repeated the suggestion gently. I told her I'd think about it. I never did. Then came the final push. The week before the gala, Veronica approached Camilla about taking a more public role in the family foundation. "You could be its voice," she said. "Imagine the two of you, one advocating from within the system, the other from outside. It's a powerful image." Camilla liked the idea. I saw what Veronica was really doing, aligning Camilla's professional identity with the family brand, drawing her closer just as she tried to distance me. Despite everything, I said nothing. I didn't want Camilla to feel torn. I thought I could endure the silent war if it meant protecting her peace. I didn't realize how deeply they'd planted their seeds of doubt until the night of the gala, when Camilla leaned in and whispered, "My mother's really making an effort, don't you think?" I nodded. But inside, something shifted. That was the thing about Veronica. She didn't attack like a villain, she didn't yell or threaten, she poisoned slowly with compliments, favors, and doubt. She made you question whether your instincts were paranoia, whether your concerns were ego, whether your resistance was selfishness. And maybe I could have continued to ignore it. Maybe I could have swallowed my pride a little longer. But when she handed me that drink, when I saw the barely visible shimmer at the surface and the way her hand trembled slightly as she smiled, I knew. It was no longer about influence. No longer about control. It was about elimination. And that night, when I watched Eduardo stagger away from the table clutching his stomach, I realized I was done playing along. Whatever this was, it wasn't family drama. It was a quiet war. And now I had a reason to fight back. The Monte Carlo gala had all the elegance you'd expect. Velvet chairs, candlelit centerpieces, and soft jazz echoing beneath a chandelier so large it could crush a car. To the guests, it was a celebration of progress in football. Diversity, reform, transparency. To me, it was theater. I stood among power brokers shaking hands with the same men I'd called out in interviews months earlier. Their smiles were courteous, but their eyes read, "You're lucky we let you in the room." I wasn't there for their approval. I was there because Camilla insisted we go. Her parents had arranged for me to receive an award of recognition on behalf of my foundation, an ironic gesture, considering that Eduardo had once tried to buy out my youth program just to silence its criticism of his allies. The entire evening smelled like a PR stunt, but I played my part, delivered my speech, and thanked the board. Then came the wine. It was after dinner. Dessert was being served, French pear tart with saffron cream. Veronica had disappeared for a moment, then returned with 2 glasses of red. "A private toast," she said warmly, stepping between Camilla and me. "You've made us very proud tonight." Her tone was syrupy, her gaze just slightly too fixed. She handed me one of the glasses and raised hers in mock cheer. "To family," she said. I froze. It was almost imperceptible. A light film along the edge of the glass, like oil over water. A shimmer that caught the chandelier's reflection just wrong. She held her own glass, identical almost, but I knew. My instincts had been trained on the pitch for decades. You notice things when your career depends on half-second decisions. Didn't hesitate. I reached over, clinked my glass gently against hers, and as we pulled back, I smoothly reversed them, placing her glass in her left hand and mine in my right. Her smile twitched, just barely. But she didn't object. Eduardo joined us a moment later. "Still here?" he joked. "I thought you'd be off signing autographs." "Just in time," I said. "Veronica was saving this toast for you, too." She said nothing. Eduardo raised the glass, my glass, and took a generous sip. "To the future," he said, wiping his lips. I watched him drink, watched his throat tense, watched Veronica's face go still. She glanced at the rim of his glass, then at me. The realization bloomed slowly across her expression. Not horror, not regret, but calculation. She understood exactly what I had done. I made a vague excuse about being too full for wine, asked for a glass of water instead, and smiled through. The rest of dessert. 45 minutes later, Eduardo excused himself abruptly. He didn't make it to the restroom in time. The sounds that followed, from the hallway and behind the marble bathroom door, were unmistakable. Gagging, vomiting, groaning. The buzz of conversation in the ballroom quieted briefly, then resumed with polite disregard. Veronica stood frozen by the table, a hand on her wineglass untouched. "I think it was the seafood," she said too quickly when Camilla asked. "Eduardo's always been sensitive." Camilla rushed off to check on her father. Veronica and I stood alone at the table for a moment. Her voice was low and sharp. "What do you think you're doing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for the napkin in my lap, gently wrapped the wineglass meant for me, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my jacket. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, her eyes cold. "No," I replied, finally looking at her. "I think you will." Then I turned and left the room. I didn't need to cause a scene. I didn't need to shout or threaten. The damage had already been done, not by me, but by her own hand. Now I had the proof. Now I had the motive. And for the first time in years, I had clarity. This wasn't just about football or family or reputation. It was about what happens when the people who fear losing power finally realize they already have. I didn't sleep that night. While Camilla lay beside me, tossing lightly under the hotel's linen sheets, I stared at the ceiling, heart still beating in a slow, calculated rhythm. I'd replayed every moment in my head, the shimmer in the glass, Veronica's forced smile, Eduardo's sudden collapse. It was all there, clear as a slow-motion replay on the pitch. But I needed more than instinct now. I needed proof that couldn't be denied. The next morning, while Camilla was still in the shower, I texted someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 2 years, Marcelo Rivas, a former forensic toxicologist who had consulted with FIFA's ethics, bored during an internal doping scandal I helped expose in my final year as a player. Marcelo had been blacklisted by the Federation after speaking out about political interference. But he owed me. And more importantly, he believed in truth over silence. I didn't explain everything. I just said I had a wine glass that might have been tampered with and needed it tested for benzodiazepines or related sedatives. He agreed without hesitation. I delivered the glass to his lab that afternoon, wrapped in sterile cloth, no labels. We shook hands like men handling something far more dangerous than glass. Because we were. Then, I waited. For 3 days, I moved through the world like nothing had changed. I trained the youth team at my academy, attended 2 charity meetings, even joined Camilla and her parents for a recovery brunch, where Eduardo appeared pale but cheerful, brushing off the incident as bad oysters. Veronica didn't speak much, and when she did, it was with clipped precision. She never once looked me in the eyes. Camilla, meanwhile, had no idea. She'd chalked up the tension to exhaustion. "I think you're still jet-lagged," she said sweetly one night. "You haven't really smiled since Monte Carlo." I kissed her forehead and told her I was just focused on the upcoming training tour. On the 4th evening, my phone buzzed. It was Marcelo. "Lucas, he said without preamble. The test came back. There were clear traces of alprazolam in the wine. Residue, Xanax to be specific. Dosage was high. Not lethal, but enough to knock you out, disorient you for hours. If you'd had that glass before a media appearance or a board meeting or driven home, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I exhaled slowly, thanked him, and asked for a signed report. He paused. You need to tell me where this came from, he said, because if this goes to the police, I'll be required to testify. I hesitated. Family matter, I said. For now. I ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. The weight of it wasn't just in the drug or the report, it was in what it meant. Veronica hadn't just tried to sabotage me. She'd risked my health, my safety, possibly even my career. And for what? To make me miss a speech? A game? A headline? No. It was bigger than that. She didn't want me embarrassed. She wanted me unreliable. She wanted Camilla to doubt me, not just once, but permanently. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't the first time Veronica had used medicine as a weapon. I began checking into her prescription records. A friend at a pharmacy regulatory board owed me a favor, and within days I had confirmation. Veronica had filled prescriptions for benzodiazepines under 3 different physicians, all within overlapping time frames. One under her maiden name, another under a married alias, all flagged as active and renewed irregularly. There were also whispers. Rumors I'd once brushed off now made more sense. A friend of Camila's once mentioned Veronica getting overly emotional at a wedding and needing to be taken home early. A former board member from the family foundation had quietly resigned after a strange argument with Veronica and never returned calls. And Eduardo, he wasn't just complicit. He was protective, defensive, a gatekeeper. It was becoming clear. This family had spent decades curating their image like a brand. Clean, elite, above scrutiny. And anyone who threatened that image, even from within, had to be neutralized. Still, I said nothing to Camilla. Why? Because I wasn't ready to confront the real question yet. What would she do when she found out who her parents truly were? Would she see the manipulation? Or would she retreat into the safety of denial? I wasn't sure, but I knew this. I wasn't going to act without a full picture. Not yet. So I waited. I collected. I watched. Because when you play against professionals who've built their lives on control, the only way to win is not by striking first, but by exposing everything at once. And I was almost there. The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, slipped under the Academy's office door with no return address. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note in firm, careful script. You should see this. V. That was it. No threats, no explanations. Just that. At first I thought it was a bluff, but deep down I recognized the handwriting. Vanessa, Camilla's sister-in-law. Eduardo and Veronica had always seen her as ornamental, someone who married their son Sebastian but never quite fit the brand. And now it seemed she was ready to speak, or at least, to show. I plugged in the drive, half expecting it to be empty. But what appeared were 6 video files, time-stamped, grainy, but clear enough. They were security camera recordings from Eduardo and Veronica's estate, the same night of the gala. The first video showed the kitchen, Veronica, alone, standing by the counter with 2 glasses of red wine. She glanced over her shoulder, took out a small vial from her purse and emptied its contents into one of the glasses. Her movements were calm, practiced. She even swirled the wine afterward, as if to dissolve the evidence. Then came the clip of me entering, taking both glasses from the counter, silent, efficient. Her smile didn't waver. The next clip was from the dining room, Eduardo lifting the glass, my glass, and drinking casually mid-conversation. But the most damning video came later. Veronica and Eduardo in the kitchen again, post-dinner. Eduardo was furious, pacing. "You gave me the wrong glass," he snapped. "Are you out of your mind? Veronica hissed back. How was I supposed to know he'd switch them? I was careful. Eduardo threw up his hands. This isn't the first time you've pulled something like this. We got lucky before. But this could ruin everything. I paused the video. My pulse was steady, but my mind was racing. Not the first time. He'd said it so plainly. The next clip dated 2 days after the gala. Eduardo and Veronica again, in their private study. This time the conversation was quieter, but more chilling. He knows. Eduardo muttered, pouring himself a drink. He's watching us. Veronica sat with a glass of white wine, legs crossed elegantly. It doesn't matter. Camilla will never believe him over us. She never has. There was a long silence before she added, I've already started planting seeds, telling her I'm worried about their marriage, that maybe it's moving too fast, that he's unstable. She said it so casually, as if orchestrating the collapse of her daughter's trust was just another Tuesday errand. I watched the footage again, then again, not to confirm what I already knew, but to feel it, to let it settle. This wasn't a fluke. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment lapse. This was a pattern, a method. They didn't just dislike me. They dismantled anything they couldn't control. And Camilla? She was a target, too. She just didn't know it. I called Vanessa the next morning. She answered on the first ring. Why now? I asked. Why send it to me? Her voice was steady, but weary. Because I've been you. I saw what they did to you and realized I watched it happen to me too. I said nothing. She continued. When I first married Sebastian, they tried everything. Said I was too opinionated, too middle class, too ambitious. They convinced him I was trying to elevate myself through marriage. I almost left. What changed? I got pregnant, she said flatly. Suddenly I was useful. But only because of James, their first grandchild. The moment I stopped being a threat, they smiled again. And Sebastian? He doesn't see it. Still defends them. Still thinks I'm exaggerating. But I couldn't let them do to Camilla what they did to me. Or to you. I thanked her. We didn't speak long. We didn't need to. The footage said more than words ever could. I spent the next 2 days combing through Camilla's past, quietly, respectfully. I reached out to her former college roommate Bethany, who remembered an old engagement Camilla had called off suddenly. A man named Tomas, a medical researcher from Lisbon. He was perfect for her, Bethany said. But her parents hated him. Said he was hiding something. They showed her messages, fake ones, I think. Photos of him with another woman. Camilla broke it off, never even gave him a chance to explain. I found Tomas through a mutual friend. After an hour-long call, he forwarded emails from that time. Messages Camilla never received. Ones he said were intercepted. He'd tried to fight for her, but she ghosted him completely. He still didn't understand why. Now I did. This wasn't just about sabotaging me. This was a history of manipulation dressed in love. A strategy of social control disguised as parental concern. I wasn't their first opponent. I was just the one who noticed, and I was done staying silent. I knew I couldn't just tell Camilla. Not with words alone. Her loyalty to her parents was deep generational, tied to childhood memories and the illusion of security they had so carefully crafted. If I accused them directly, it would be my word against theirs. And with Veronica's head start, whispers of instability, concern for Camilla's well-being, I would only fall into the trap they'd set. So I decided to show her. It began with a dinner invitation, casual, homemade. Just the four of us. Camilla, her brother Sebastian, Vanessa, and me. Camila didn't suspect anything. Neither did Sebastian. Veronica and Eduardo weren't invited. I needed to start with the people closest to them first, the ones most likely to deny what they couldn't. Yet see, over roasted chicken and Rioja, we talked like family. Memories. Football. Vanessa kept the conversation warm and unassuming, When dessert arrived, I stood and quietly connected my laptop to the living room smart TV. "There's something I'd like you both to see," I said. Camilla looked puzzled. Sebastian leaned back, eyebrows raised. I pressed play. The screen flickered, then came the first clip. Veronica in the kitchen, swirling the wine with that same familiar calculation. Sebastian's fork froze midair. Camilla didn't blink. Then the moment Eduardo drank. Then the confrontation in the kitchen after. Then the quiet conspiracy in the study. Veronica planting seeds. Eduardo pouring scotch like nothing mattered when The final clip ended. Silence settled over the room like a fog. Camilla stared ahead, her breath shallow. This can't be real," she whispered. Sebastian shook his head, lips parted, eyes refusing to meet ours. "They wouldn't. Mom wouldn't." Vanessa's voice was soft but firm. "She did, Sebas. And you know it. You've seen it. How she treats me. How she controlled you all your life." "But why?" Camilla asked, her voice breaking. "Why would she go this far?" I stepped forward. "Because she saw me as a threat, not just to her approval but to her control over you. And this isn't the first time. You remember, Tomas?" Camilla froze. Her eyes narrowed. "What does he have to do with this?" I reached for the folder I'd placed on the side table. Inside, printed emails, timelines, screenshots of intercepted messages. They sabotaged that relationship too. Faked evidence, deleted messages. I spoke to him. He never cheated, he never lied. Camilla flipped through the papers slowly. Her hands trembled. Sebastian stood up, pacing. "I can't believe this. This is insane." "No," Vanessa said, quietly standing beside him. "What's insane is how long we've accepted their version of reality. I tried to tell you for years. You said I was paranoid." Sebastian turned away, running a hand through his hair. Camilla looked at me. Tears welled, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to have to choose between them and me. I wanted you to see it for yourself, all of it." She looked down, closed the folder, exhaled, then finally, "What now?" I didn't answer. Because I wasn't the one who needed to. Later that night, Camilla called her parents, told them we were coming over, all of us. "There's something we need to talk about," she said, "as a family." Veronica agreed, too quickly. Eduardo's voice in the background. Smooth, unbothered. Of course, always happy to clear the air. But this time I came prepared. The following evening we arrived at their estate. I carried my camera bag, not to take pictures but because inside it was everything they feared. The USB, the prescription records, the signed toxicology report, the printed screenshots, the interview transcripts. Sebastian walked in first, a shell of his usual confidence. Vanessa beside him. Camilla and I followed, hands loosely joined. The living room was staged like a press conference. Chairs arranged, fresh flowers on the coffee table, soft classical music in the background. Veronica wore cream silk. Eduardo sipped red wine. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding," Eduardo said as we entered. "Let's clear it up." "No misunderstanding," I said calmly, pulling a tripod from my bag and setting it in the center of the room. "We're documenting this conversation for the family archives," Veronica scoffed. "This is ridiculous. You don't record your elders like criminals." I looked up. "Then you've got nothing to worry about." For 2 hours we laid it all out, quietly, systematically. No yelling, no emotion, just facts. I played the video clips, presented the reports, read the email timestamps. Sebastian stared at his feet. Vanessa held his hand. Camilla sat motionless. Veronica's mask cracked first. "I did what I had to do," she snapped, "to protect my daughter from you, from all of this." Eduardo remained composed longer, but the more I revealed, the harder it became for him to maintain the facade. He denied, deflected, even laughed once. But when Camilla asked him, Did you erase Tomas from my life? He didn't answer. She stood, her voice was steady. You're my parents, but what you've done is not love, it's control. And I won't be part of it anymore. Veronica began to cry, not out of regret, but from the recognition that her grip was slipping. Eduardo looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe the game had finally run its course. I placed the USB on the coffee table. Everything's on there. Keep it, or burn it. I don't care. But if you ever interfere in our lives again, if I hear so much as a whisper in the press or among your circles, I'll make sure this goes to everyone who matters. Eduardo stared at me for a long time. Then, for the first time since I'd met him, he nodded. Not in defiance, not in disdain, in resignation. As we left, Camilla didn't look back. And in that moment I realized something far more powerful than revenge had taken place. We hadn't just exposed them. We had finally freed ourselves. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. It was a silence filled with decisions, with the slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust between Camilla and me, and with a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. We didn't speak about her parents much, not because we were avoiding the truth, but because we had already faced it. The confrontation was over. The truth had been laid bare. There was nothing left to explain. Veronica and Eduardo didn't call. Not once. No follow-up meetings. No attempts to apologize or deny. Just complete silence. And that, in its own way, said everything. Camilla stepped back from the family foundation. She said she needed space to rediscover what helping people actually means. I could see the shift in her. Quieter, more reflective, but stronger. She started volunteering independently at youth programs outside her family's network. She even joined me on 2 training camps with my academy. The kids loved her. She didn't need a press release or an audience, just a field, a purpose, and her own voice. 3 months later, we found out we were expecting. Camila told me with tears in her eyes and laughter in her breath. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. Like life was giving us a clean page, an unmarked field. That night we sat on the balcony of our apartment overlooking the city, watching the streetlights flicker like stars, and I made a silent promise to the future. Our child would never have to earn our love. They'd never be manipulated with it. They'd never be told who to trust or who to become. About a month after the announcement, a certified letter arrived from Eduardo's legal office. Inside was the deed to the home we had been renting for nearly 2 years, transferred to Camilla and me. Free and clear. No conditions, no message. Just paperwork. Along with it came a second document. The establishment of a trust fund in our unborn child's name, funded with an initial deposit that would set them up for life. Again, no note. Just a signature. It wasn't an apology. Eduardo didn't believe in apologies, but it was an acknowledgement, a quiet surrender, a final move. On a board he no longer controlled. Camilla read the documents and said nothing at first. Then she folded them, placed them in a drawer, and simply said, "Good." We didn't respond. We didn't visit. And for the first time since I'd joined her family, it didn't feel like we were running from them. It felt like we had stepped out of their shadow. 6 months passed. Camilla gave birth to a daughter we named Alba, after the light we felt we'd earned. Veronica and Eduardo visited the hospital briefly. They brought gifts, sat quietly, and didn't offer advice. They held Alba gently, posed for a few photos under Camilla's careful watch, and left without a single passive-aggressive comment or loaded suggestion. No manipulation, no veiled insults, just respectful distance. It was surreal, almost unnerving, but it held. They never apologized for what they'd done, and we never asked them to. What mattered was the boundary. They stayed. Behind it, that was our real win. Not the proof, not the confrontation, not even the property deed or the trust fund. What we earned was sovereignty. Over our marriage, our choices, our future. They tried to rewrite our story. We took the pen back. Looking back, it wasn't a dramatic courtroom scene or a public takedown that gave us closure. It was something far quieter and far more difficult, choosing not to play their game. I didn't expose Veronica and Eduardo to the media. I didn't weaponize the footage or threaten them with public disgrace. I simply let the truth exist, fully and undeniably, and placed it where it mattered most, into Camilla's hands. That was the shift. That was the justice. We didn't win by destroying them. We won by refusing to be shaped by them. When you grow up around control disguised as love, it's hard to tell the difference between loyalty and silence. Camilla had to unlearn that. So did Sebastian. So did I, in my own way. We all did. But the moment we saw clearly, the spell broke. What happened with Veronica wasn't just a difficult family situation. It was a case study in emotional manipulation, one that happens far more often than people realize. When influence becomes obsession, and when protection becomes possession, relationships turn toxic, no matter how polite they appear from the outside. I later shared the entire story, stripped of names, with a friend of mine, a psychologist who specializes in high-control family dynamics. She said something that stuck with me. The most dangerous manipulators are the ones who never raise their voice. They raise doubts instead. That's exactly what Veronica did. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She gently nudged Camilla to question me, to see me as unstable, emotional, untrustworthy. She eroded trust not with conflict, but with concern. And that's why so many people stay trapped in those dynamics, because nothing ever seems bad enough to leave. But manipulation doesn't need to scream. Sometimes it only needs to whisper. The turning point wasn't the evidence, it wasn't even the confrontation. It was the moment Camilla saw the truth with her own eyes and refused to look away. And that is what I hope people take from this story. Not the scandal, not the revenge, but the reminder that boundaries, truth, and quiet strength are often the most powerful forms of justice. If you've ever experienced something similar, whether from a partner's family, a toxic friend, or even your own parents, I hope this story gives you clarity, or at least the courage to trust what your gut has been telling you all along. And if it did, if something in this resonated with your life or opened your eyes to a pattern you hadn't fully named, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear. Like this video if it spoke to something you've lived. Share it if you know someone who needs to see it. And if you want more stories where silence is broken and dignity is reclaimed, subscribe. Because sometimes living well isn't just the best revenge. It's the only one that truly lasts.